Based in Detroit, Michigan, and founded in 1903, the Ford Motor Company has long been one of the most well-known names in the automotive world. Ford's creation of the assembly line in 1914 revolutionized automobile production, and it has made its everlasting mark in history. Their first production car, the Model T, was a bit crude. However, Ford sold over 15 million Model T between 1908 and 1927, bringing the horseless carriage to the masses. In 1927, the first Model A rolled out of the factory. It was a great leap forward and marked the second biggest success in Ford's history, selling over 1 million models in the first year alone. The Model A did not have a very long run. It was only around for 4 years, but it was a pivotal point in Ford's career in their entire automotive history, because it was their first kind of modernized design, and it was a huge success. So they sold 5 million cars in those 4 years. And if you look at the Model T, which they had built for almost 20 years, 19 years, they sold 15 million in 19 years versus 5 million in 4 years. So it was a huge success, and it came in a lot of various configurations. So this model right here is a cabriolet or cab, and it just means it has the drop top, the cloth top on top. And the Ford Model A was also really important because it basically standardized the pedal configuration for cars. So if you look back on some of my older videos, I did a video on a 1912 Buick. And back then in 1910, 1920, that kind of range, manufacturers were still trying to figure out how they wanted the pedals set up. So sometimes you'll have the gas on the left and the clutch on the right. And when you're so used to driving the other way around, that can really throw you for a loop and make you really nervous if somebody pops out in front of you that you're gonna hit the wrong pedals on accident. So it was great that they standardized the pedals, but they're not exactly set up how we have pedals today. So the pedals in this car, it's the 3-pedal configuration, but the gas pedal isn't a pedal, it's a floor button. And you just press that like you would a pedal, but it's just a little button on the floor. And then there's also a foot starter. So above the little gas button on the floor, above it, right next to the steering shaft, is a starter button. So you get in the car, you turn the key on, and then you hit the starter with your foot to start it up. Ford is not only one of the most profitable car manufacturers in the world, but they're the longest single-owned family business. So Ford has been around for about 110 years and owned by the Ford family since new, which is crazy because a lot of these big companies, they tend to trade hands a lot. So that's a serious accomplishment. And then because they've been around so long, things were done a bit differently back in the day. So I already knew this just from my BMW. I have a 1930 BMW, but back in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, they didn't have chrome. So everything you see on this car would not have originally been chrome plated, it would have been nickel plating. On this car, I'm not sure if it's chrome or nickel. I'll have to do a little research into that. Usually things get replated in chrome just because it's modern, it's easier, it is just a better solution. And visually there's not a huge difference, but it's just a fun little fact that originally this would not have been chrome, it would have been nickel plated. The original Ford Model A would go comfortably about 50 miles an hour. And by comfortably, I don't mean to today's standards, but that was a decent cruising speed. So today, people like a little more power, so this has been modified. It's not quite hot rodded like some of the Ford Model A's you see. I mean, obviously it doesn't have the big blower and, you know, all that, but it has been modified to make it a little faster and more user-friendly. So the old 30s and 20s cars had interesting little things, like on the steering wheel, you'll see a little lever, and that's a spark advance. So when you turn the car on, you'd have to manually advance the spark. But this car was converted to 12 volt and it has a distributor, so you don't need to mess with the advance when starting or driving this car, which it's kind of fun to do. I still have the advance on my BMW, but if you're not used to it, it's definitely a learning curve. So it's nice, it's user friendly, and it's a good little update to have. A couple other updates on this car, so stainless steel headers, aluminum intake, and one of the big ones, so this is where the fuel tank used to be. And on Fords and on old 20s and 30s cars and older, there was no fuel pump. They were gravity fed tanks. So the tank is a little high up and it would just get fuel down to the engine. And when the fuel level gets low, I have learned from experience, even if there's some left in the tank, it's gravity fed. So if it's not enough weight of fuel to feed down, you run out of gas. So this car has been converted to a 16-gallon gas tank that is in the back of the car with a fuel pump. So you get more room for gas and the fuel pump, so you're not gonna have like a quarter tank left and run out of gas. Obviously, this Model A has been restored. It just so happens it was restored in one of my ultimate favorite color combinations of blue over tan, which is just such a timeless and classy look. But the cool thing about that too is the Model A originally only came in 4 color options: blue, green, gray, or black. So even though it's restored and a little modified for easier driving, easier use, it still has not the original blue color, but the kind of correct, you know, it is a blue color instead of, like, they never came in red or white or some of the other colors you see. So I like the fact that it's been made easier to use, but at the same time, it has kept its 1927 like style and look and feel to it without too many modifications, but while just making it more of a pleasure to drive. To today's world of supercars and hypercars, many people may consider the Model A just an antique car, but it's so much more than that. The Model A, so Henry Ford's son, Edsel, actually was working with Lincoln, and Ford acquired Lincoln back in 1922. And Lincoln was about beauty and pretty design. And so Edsel had a lot of say in the making of the Model A's design. So it became a very classy car, more upscale than the Model T, classy design, timeless, but at the same time, underneath it is real mechanical genius for 1927. I mean, if you think about it, this car is almost 100 years old and it's still on the road today. And not just that, but there's no lack of Model A's still on the road today, which just goes to prove how well the design and the mechanics have withstood the test of time. So one of the little fun facts about the Model A, if you look at both sides at the door handles, there is a keyhole on the passenger side of the car, but no keyhole on the outside of the driver's side of the car. But there is a keyhole on the interior driver's side of the car. And I have heard that the reason that was done, Henry Ford wanted safety. And so he thought it would be dangerous for drivers to be entering on the traffic side of the car. So he had it on the passenger side instead. Now, I'm not sure if that's the real reason. Sometimes things get a little lost in history, but that is what I have heard, and I think it's a pretty fun little, fact that maybe not a lot of people know. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and learned a little something about the Model A. If you liked, please subscribe and stay tuned because we got a lot more coming very soon.